the Elizabeth Britton Award and the Chiquita Culberson Award. Those awards are for exemplary service over a long period of time to ABLS and exemplary contributions to the scientific advancement of the field. So it's a combination award. The intent is that on an alternating basis, one of the awards will be awarded every year, potentially to someone, but there's not necessarily going to be an awardee every year. But to start it off, we have an awardee who blew this out of the water and wins both awards in 1 year. To present the award, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Weber's successor, who's building on his legacy at the CU Herbarium, Aaron Tripp.
But not fast enough. In fact, I'm never going to get there. So I just want to say a few things, and sorry for just jotting down some notes. Bill arrived in 1946 with the faintest herbarium present at the University of Colorado. Primarily, that was of local ecological collections by early planty ecologists like Francis Vermaele. His vision of the herbarium was grand. It was international. He wasted no time after arriving in building that thing from the bottom up, making contacts and colleagues from all around the world, sending exicati to so many people that impacted many of you as well. Over 60 years, 70 years? 70 years, the William A. Weber collection has grown to a world-class, a very active, a very well-curated herbarium that plays a leading role in whatever it is, floristics, evolutionary, ecological research programs, both at home and abroad. I'm really grateful to have landed here in this position. I don't think I'll ever fill your shoes, but I'll do my best. At the Colorado Herbarium, we can claim one of the highest ratios of vascular plants to cryptogams of any herbarium in the world. Anybody want to take a guess? This is the interactive part.
Algae, everything.
Our total herbarium is about 550,000. What percentage do you think is cryptogamic?
50.
65.
Just below 50%. That's right.
And 42,000 specimens sent out to other institutions over the world.
So obviously scholarship worthy of a major international award feels like accomplishment enough, but scholarship in not one, but two, but three fields, that's angiosperms, lichens, and bryophytes, is just a phenomenal lifetime achievement. So on behalf of the American Bryological and Lichenological Society, the very first Britton and Chiquita Culberson Award.
Ah, yes.
Quick sec. I next want to introduce Tim Hogan. Tim is a longtime collection manager at University of Colorado Herbarium, one of the best botanists in Western North America. I'm so lucky to have landed and worked with him and Dina and Dr. Weber and numerous others. And Tim was mentored for many decades by Dr. Weber, so he's going to share a bit more about his biography and achievements.
It's the true embodiment of everything. That's excellent, and it has no kind of fault or flaw. And I, my lords, embody the law. The constitutional guardian, I, of pretty young girls in charge, and I, all very agreeable girls, and none are over the age of 21. Dum, dum. Okay.
Okay, now I have to sit down after that. I'm done. Okay. So, William Alfred Weber, I've been wanting to use that for a while. William Alfred Weber, a fellow of the Linnaean Society, was born in New York City in 1918. And Dr. Weber speaks oh so fondly of growing up in New York City in that era and all the mentors that he had in becoming a natural historian, a naturalist. At 5 years old, an older cousin, Brownie, gave him his first microscope, and it was a revelatory experience that I think a lot of you probably shared, of looking through that microscope for the first time and seeing this whole other universe. He had mentors such as Josiah Otis Swift in the 1920s, a friendship with Roger Torrey Peterson. He learned he got his introduction to botany through IDing winter shrubs and trees. He talks of having access to the back rooms of the American Museum and, quote unquote, sitting at the knee of Ernst Mayr. Dr. Weber went to Iowa State College and graduated in 1940, the same year that he married his wife of 56 years, Sammy. And they had 3 daughters, one of whom is here. This is Heather, and the others are Lynna and Erica.
And granddaughter and great-grandkids.
There you have it. From Iowa State, he pursued graduate studies at Washington State University. His studies were interrupted by the Second World War, in which William Weber served as a conscientious objector. In 1946,
Absolutely.
Dr. Weber arrived in Boulder for his tenure at the University of Colorado. Unlike these days where people jump around, he's been here for his entire career. As Aaron alluded to or said, he is set to work right after he got here in building an herbarium from a nucleus of 32,000 specimens, 2,000 of which were bryophytes of Geneva Sayre, a woman bryologist who worked with Avon Nelson and I think was mentored by Grout. In 1952, he began serious work on lichens, and soon after that, 1957-58, he held an NSF fellowship at the National Museum in Stockholm to carry on the study of lichens, and while there, he met and became an associate, in a sense, with Eric Hultain. Dr. Weber has traveled the world studying and collecting lichens, bryophytes, vascular plants, from Alaska and the Arctic down to Mexico, throughout Western North America, Scandinavia, Australia and Papua New Guinea, the Altai Mountains, Nepal, and I like this one. His first trip to Nepal was with the women's expedition to climb Dhaulagiri. And of course the Galapagos, of which Frank will share some information shortly. He built and distributed an extraordinary lichen exocadi of 700 numbers, distributed to 60 herbaria all over the world with, as noted, a total of 42,000 specimens. An incredible amount of work. He's advised and mentored such prominent lichenologists as Didi Awashti from India, the late, who was a recipient of the award Dr. Weber is receiving now. Roger Anderson, Toby Sprabill, who I think Dr. Weber is going to talk about a little bit, as well as Catherine Lafarge, who is obviously not here this week with a back problem, in bryology. And I will say that my sense is that Dr. Weber is delighted that Erin is our current curator and her love of lichenology and of collections. Dr. Weber's a botanist. His knowledge of the Colorado flora and beyond extends through the groups. It's encyclopedic, it's an unprecedented taxonomy, ecology, phytogeographic connections, taxonomic quandaries. He's been tireless in working to establish small herbaria across the state in a lot of the national monuments and parks. Black Canyon of the Gunnison, Colorado National Monument, Dinosaur, Mesa Verde, Rocky Mountain. His vascular floras, which actually reaches across decades, most recently with his colleague Ron Whitman, who's here, has been targeted as much as to amateur, highly interested botanists as to professional botanists. And he takes pride in that. With Ron, he published Bryophytes of Colorado in 2007. And the final thing I'll say is, to this day, Bill Weber carries a childlike delight into each and every day. So with that, I will hand it over to Frank, and we'll proceed. Oh, one last thing I have to say. The award, one of those awards is Mrs. Britton. When he was 11 years old, she chased him out of the New York Botanical Garden on his way to school when he was collecting a piece of skunk cabbage for show and tell.
Okay, I don't know whether I can best this, but you all have seen my presentation today about the work I've been doing in Galapagos, and that work would essentially be impossible. And I would, in fact, not have been hired there if it wasn't for Bill Weber, who's sitting here. Sorry. Essentially, Bill Weber has been among the people who went on the first international scientific expedition to the Galapagos Islands. And he is one of the people who pushed and convinced Ecuador to declare the Galapagos Islands as the first natural heritage site for humanity in the world. I think this is pretty amazing, and when I actually got hired there as a lichenologist, as a cryptogamic botanist, I went there without knowing any of this. And I arrived in the islands, and I was overwhelmed. I was basically overwhelmed, and the diversity of the lichens and bryophytes that are in these islands blew me away. I sat there and I thought, how on earth am I ever going to get on top of this? So and here's a curious story. Here's a very curious story, because I read in one of Bill's papers that he wrote about the Galapagos, and about the lichens of the Galapagos, and about the bryophytes of Galapagos. When he came to the Galapagos on that first expedition, he went to the woods and tried to figure out what this diversity was. He came out of the woods, he sat down on a boulder, and he started to cry. Because he couldn't deal with this amazing diversity there. So when he did this, and when I read this, I thought, okay, I need to meet this guy. And I also thought, okay, I mean, nobody has collected much there yet, but him. So I need to go to Colorado, and that's what I did. I was hired in the Galapagos Island as a lichen person, basically, there in November 2005. And so 2006, I took an opportunity to visit Bill here in the herbarium, and he took me out for dinner, and it was lunch, I think, and we had a wonderful time. We talked a lot about Galapagos, and it was an eye-opener. And I think my understanding that I had from this time on about these islands basically stemmed from this experience, right? And I spent like 4 weeks going through the herbarium specimens, and I decided when I returned to the Galapagos and when I had collected more material that it was still not enough. I had to go back. So I came back in 2008 and I spent another 4 weeks. And actually Tim Hogan was very generous, and Bill Weber at the time, because they decided having the material here wasn't just enough, but I needed to have that material in Galapagos, be able to work on it. And as you know, the Galapagos are a very remote place, and if you send material there, it's very difficult, and you can have your doubts whether anything will return, right? So anyway, up to this day, I still have some specimens that I actually need to return to Aaron.
Yeah, Frank, I want to talk to you about that.
But also what we did, my wife Frauke, she went through all the bryophytes, and as you know, it's very easy to make duplicates of bryophytes. So there's now a complete set, an entire set of Bill Weber's collections of the bryophytes in the Galapagos herbarium on the island of Santa Cruz. So recently I went to a conference, the International Mycological Congress in Puerto Rico. We had, as it is customary, the IL dinner, so the dinner of the International Association of Lichenology, and they hand out a prize which is quite unique to lichenologists. And this prize, I've said today, can be regarded as a Nobel Prize of lichenology. It's for lifetime achievement in lichenology. And I couldn't think of anybody better suited for this prize, but Will. And I was very surprised when they actually handed out this prize to Bill Weber this year. And I have the honor of giving this prize to him. And here's the medal. It's called the Acharius medal. And if you look at this medal and you actually flip it over, on this side it just says William Weber, IRL 2018 for Meritis. And on the other side, you will see an image of Acharius, and that was etched into silver at the Academy of Sciences in Sweden. And this is an exact replica of this original medal that is still there with the Naturalist Academy for Sweden. And so Acharius, as you all know, is the father, or regarded as the father of lichenology. And so I think, congratulations. I want to say one more word. Still, Bill Weber has, as you probably all know, a German name. Weber is Weber. And he just told me that he is related to a famous German poet. Rilke is one of his ancestors. And well, I don't know much Rilke really, so I can't quote Rilke, unfortunately. But I can quote another important German poet, and this poet is quite universally known because he's called Goethe. And Goethe for me is like the universal genius. He knew at the time everything of everything. We just heard that Bill Weber at his time was a bit like this as well, at least in the realm of biology. He knew about botany in a wide sense, including vascular plants, lichens and bryophytes. And so the thing that I want to quote is from Goethe's Faust, and it goes like this. Habe nun nach Philosophie, Juristerei und Medizin durchaus studiert mit heißem Bemühen. Da stehe ich nun, ich Amateur, bin so klug als wie zuvor. You got that? So I don't know whether I can aptly translate it, but it goes something like, Faust is this universal genius. He knows everything about everything. He studied jurisprudence, he studied philosophy, he studied medicine, but still after all these studies, he doesn't know the secrets of the world. And he stands there and he's kind of doubting himself. And so I think we all as scientists are basically doing this. We're kind of doubting ourselves, and that's what science is about. And I think Bill Weber is a great example of that. So, thank you.
What can I say? I'm thinking of Sammy, my Sammy, and Goethe. Nur die Welt ich kennt, weiß, was ich leide, allein und abgetrennt von aller Freude. Seh ich ans Firmament an der Seite, ach, die mir liebt und kennt, ist in der Weite.
Wow.
Wer die Sehnsucht kennt, weiß, was ich leide. That's a tribute to my wife. I have to tell you about Toby. Toby wrote to me and told me that he was living in Montana and was collecting lichens and mosses and wanted some help identifying them. So I did, and I never met him until he was hired by the Forest Service to come to Colorado for a few days to see if he could find living plants of these tiny little Ophioglossacea ferns. And believe it or not, Toby found that they were abundant on the ski slopes. And so he made a wonderful collection of them. Up until that time, they were considered extremely rare. Well, I helped him as much as I could and learned a little bit about his family troubles. His family was a German
Immigrant.
one that came over Stayed at Fort Collins for a short time, but didn't like it there and went up to Montana. I had no idea what his family does or did, but it turned out that Toby was very unhappy in Montana. And so finally, he decided to go back and go to school. So he went back to Germany and went to school there and got in Graz or some, I think it was in Graz in Austria, he got the PhD. And I hadn't heard anything from him for a long time. His father had told him, what the hell, you'll never make any money collecting lichens and mosses. And Toby took that seriously. And so he decided to study lichens and mosses. It's kind of like when I first went to the museum the day I came on the campus here, Rodek asked me, well, what do you expect to do here? I expect to give you a collection of plants. Do we need one? He said. I'll never forget that. So, I hadn't heard much about Toby for a long time, and all of a sudden I find that in August, I think it was, he gets the Acharius medal for discovering a third symbiont in lichens, which hadn't been known anything about for years. And I wrote him a letter congratulating him. And he wrote back and said, let me tell you how I got started. I had no person to help me up here, but I went to the library. And believe it or not, I saw papers published there by a man who had collected mosses and lichens here a long time ago. And that's what started me out. Amazing.
Yeah.
To be started that way, with no real help except that, and what I gave him. I wrote back to Toby and I said, Toby, let me tell you one. When I was going to go to high school, I was living in northern Manhattan. I didn't want to go to the high school near me because it had a terrible reputation. I wanted to go where my sister went because all I knew about my sister's education in her high school was that she learned and had to memorize, and I memorized simply by listening to her day by day. Wo ustque tandem abotera Catalina hatientia nostra. Quam diu etiam furor ist illus nos illudet? That's Cicero's argument against whoever it was. Anyway, I decided I would roller skate to the high school I wanted to go to up in the North Bronx, about 6 miles away. And I had been in the Botanical Garden occasionally. I decided, well, there's hardly any place that I can ride skates in the Bronx. Too many, rough places and cobblestones and stuff like that. So I'd get up early in the morning and roller skate, and my roller skating took me through Bronx Botanical Garden. And there, this was the beginning of birding. There were a couple of elderly gentlemen there with what they called opera glasses, and one of them I followed, and he let me look through his opera glasses if there was anything exciting. And I saw my first and only ever prothonotary warbler with him. Well, I started the bird club. That was the result. The Cialis Bird Club. It's the German name, sehen alles. We see all. But Cialis has another connotation. Anyhow, he took a group of us. I made a bird club. It's still going. There are 2 of us left. But
An honorary
he wanted to
bird.
show us something, one of his treasures. And his treasure that he wanted to show us was an Irish shillelagh, a lacquer, a very hard polished wood. But he also brought us out a few trays that turned out to be mounted hummingbirds from South America. Who was it that taught you through the library about mosses and lichens? Mr. Williams. I was walking with the same Mr. Williams who started me out in natural history, just like he's the same man in another generation started Toby out. How about that?